The legend of the Green Children of Woolpit starts during the reign of King Stephen in a rather tumultuous time in England's history called the Anarchy in the mid-12th century. Woolpit, or in Old English, Wulfpit, is an ancient village in Suffolk named after, as one might gather from its name, an old pit for catching wolves. Next to this wolf pit, in around 1150, a group of villagers came across two young children with green skin, apparently speaking gibberish and acting nervously. According to the writings at the time by Ralph of Coggeshall, the children were subsequently taken to the nearby home of Sir Richard de Calne, where he offered them food, but they repeatedly refused to eat. This continued for some days until the children came across some green beans in Richard de Calne's garden, which they ate straight from the ground. It is thought that the children lived with de Calne for some years, where he was able to slowly convert them over to normal food. According to the writings of the day, this change in diet led to the children losing their green complexion. The children also slowly learned to speak English, and once fluent were asked where they had come from and why their skin was once green. They replied with, "We are inhabitants of the land of St. Martin, who is regarded with peculiar veneration in the country which gave us birth. We are ignorant of how we arrived here. We only remember this, that on a certain day, when we were feeding our father's flocks in the fields, we heard a great sound, such as we are now accustomed to hear at St. Edmund's, when the bells are chiming. And whilst listening to the sound in admiration, we became, on a sudden as it were, entranced, and found ourselves among you in the fields where you were reaping. The sun does not rise upon our countrymen. Our land is little cheered by its beams. We are contented with that twilight which among you precedes the sunrise or follows the sunset. Moreover, a certain luminous country is seen, not far distant from ours, and divided from it by a very considerable river." Shortly after this revelation, Richard de Calne took the children to be baptized in a local church. However, the boy died soon afterwards through an unknown illness. The girl, later known as Agnes, continued to work for Richard de Calne for many years before marrying the Archdeacon of Ely, Richard Barre. According to one report, the pair had at least one child.
Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill. Shining brightly in the darkness, you, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome to the Hidden Citadel. We're your hosts, Willie Minix and Greg Kemp.
Hello.
And we are here today to redo the show that we recorded on Sunday that didn't quite get recorded. So, we are talking about, I don't know what to call it. Is it inner Earth or the hollow Earth? I mean, we're kind of proponents of an inner Earth theory, but not necessarily of a hollow Earth.
Correct.
Theory.
I mean, we want...
But, I mean, I'm open to a hollow Earth, I suppose, if somebody could prove it. But I do think that there are big, empty, vast spaces of underground expanse that is there in the Earth.
Well, I think we don't really care whether there's space as much as what's in there that might be intriguing, previously advanced, or having some mystery or some fingerprint of our creator that may give extra layer to what we already know about what man has done in the past and all the the timelines of man. So just the expanse alone, I don't think is as interesting to us as what could possibly be in that hollow Earth,
right.
Hollow space,
right.
Or what it means to be within the Earth. I mean, there's several things we could even explore there.
Well, we've talked about before you and I have talked about things like Sheol and things like Hades and Paradise, and how those places are within the Earth. we've mentioned how the Bible talks about at the end time the sea will give up, and then hell will give up its dead, or Hades will give up its dead, and I've been, and this is kind of a different direction. We need to do a show on ghosts because I've been thinking about ghosts and paradise and things of that nature, and it's like, you know, we don't really know what is there. We know that the angels who sinned were chained somewhere, apparently under the Euphrates River, or chained in darkness. I think the Bible says that. Is it in the Bible, or is it just in the book of Enoch where it talks about them being under the Euphrates?
I think it's in Enoch. I don't think it.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Bible just says they're chained in darkness.
Yeah.
But then we've got Abaddon that gets, released from the bottomless pit.
Yep.
We talked before in the previous incarnation of this recording that didn't work about how the earth, I think it was Misler that talked about as the earth rotates, a shaft that went through the earth would basically be a bottomless pit because it would turn, and as you're falling into it, the earth would turn and then you would fall out to the outer edge and then it would turn and you'd fall to the center again.
Never having a footing, never having a bottom point, a 0 point to push off of and it start to advance. You're always in a state of a suspended animation.
And that reminds me... Yeah, exactly. We didn't talk about it, but that reminds me of the whole Alice in Wonderland thing where she falls down the rabbit hole forever and ever and ever until finally ending in Neverland. That's Peter Pan, in Wonderland. And it's like, that's sort of an interesting allegory for this whole inner earth sort of a thing. We started this show with the green children of Woolpit, and we talked about the question is, were they from like an inner earth sort of a place, or were they from another dimension, or is the interior of the earth another dimension? I mean, there are all these questions that pop up whenever you start talking about this, and I don't think it's as simple as, well, scientifically speaking, there's magma down there.
Right.
Well, of course there are. But are they only pockets of magma? Or are they a full layer of magma that surrounds? Or is there something through the magma? Like, remember in the Bible when Jesus said to when he's given the parable about the guy in Abraham's bosom, Lazarus, and the rich man who was in Hades, and how he said there was a great gulf that they couldn't cross. Is that gulf the magma layer? I mean, because the Hebrews envisioned the underworld as being the underworld. It was under the earth.
Yeah. It's you know what? It's so interesting because there's so many references to what is within. Like you said, you have everything from Sheol to Hades to Gehenna to the Abuso, the abyss. I mean, you have several different. And then you also have the sea, and the sea was like a distinct place of chaos that you didn't know what was beneath. I would say they fished, but the depths of the sea. I heard that Neil deGrasse Tyson, is that his name? He was talking about what we know right now of our depths, which is the depth. The deepest of the depths would be Marianas Trench, to the highest mountain. He said that difference is really just 11 miles. But then...
That's crazy. It's just absolutely mind-boggling that's true.
And then...
it's almost as bad as if you were... It's almost harder to hear it from Neil deGrasse Tyson rather than hearing it from Neil deGrasse Young.
I know. I know. Truly, the guy who in Marianas Trench would be the Southern man. Southern man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He's so
Very
southern
man.
Way down there in the trench.
But anyway, we have that as far as observable science, but then there's just real, it's one thing to go into scripture and find like one or two statements and just try to extract an entire theory off of them.
it's a whole other thing
That's true.
Several places throughout talk about Sheol, talk about the depths,
talk
about like it's something when things are mentioned that often. It's important.
It's mentioned by the prophets. Yeah. It's mentioned by, Jesus. It's mentioned by the disciples. It's also mentioned in, just passing in some of the other texts, like the Psalms and things like that. It's not as if they're expounding on it all the time, but they're definitely referencing it as if, well, everybody knows this.
Here's the question. God's creation was a science and a God's physics. Everything that's observable and touchable. You look at, the new body that Jesus had and doubting Thomas. Still, it was a new body, but it had its own physics. It had depth.
Exactly.
It had touch. Right. Okay. So with that,
yes.
Then you look.
It was more than 3-dimensional.
Right.
Which was
okay. So now let's go to the Witch of Endor.
Okay, that's a good place to go.
Raised up Samuel, right? Raised him up.
Yeah, and I've heard people preach about this, and they say, well, God allowed it to happen, and it's like, that's not what the Bible says.
No.
The Bible specifically has Samuel say, why did you disturb me and bring me up? It was something she did.
Yeah, and I think there was sight to him, there was sound to him. There was physics. There were definitely, it was palpable. So it still followed something that's of our universe, something that we're supposed to know.
Well, we still have something physical even in, yes, a lot of people poo-poo the idea of ghosts and hauntings and things like that, but you and I have both experienced things like that, and it's like, there is something physical. I remember one time encountering a ghost, and we'll get into it more when we get into our ghost episode, but it grabbed me. I've heard, recently I heard about a person that got scratched by a ghost. So there's something physical, even though it's invisible. Have you ever found yourself invited to an event and not really knowing what the right apparel was to wear? If you wear something that's a little too classy, like a suit or something, you might feel out of place if everybody else is casual. If you wear something too casual, you might look around and notice that everyone else is dressed up and say to yourself, I'm just not dressed up for this occasion. Well, here at the Hidden Citadel, we have the perfect solution to this problem. Why don't you go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel tee today, and you can wear it anywhere. It's perfect for every occasion. You can wear it to a casual meeting. You can wear it to a business dinner. You could even wear it to a formal event such as a wedding or a funeral. All of these places and more are appropriate to wear a Hidden Citadel tee. And what's even more wonderful than just wearing the Hidden Citadel tee is you'll be supporting the work that we're doing here at the Hidden Citadel. So why don't you do yourself a favor and go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel t-shirt today. The link is down below in the description. Have a great day. But there are things that are invisible that are still physical,
Yeah, without question. I just, so going back to the original topic, whether it's a hollow or essentially it being underground or interred, because I think one of the things that fascinates us is just the recent discoveries of these large underground cities, and that would house like 80,000 people, 100,000 people, but why would they be living underground? And to your point,
right,
that maybe there's a flourishing civilization that maybe underground was the safest and most viable way they could function. That's, there's nothing wrong with that.
And you're referring to like some of the cities like in Turkey where they found like what's interesting is they know that early Christians hid from the Romans there, but that the cities predate Christianity by hundreds and hundreds of years. And then you've also got the buried cities, like Göbekli Tepe and all the other little areas around Göbekli Tepe. And it's like, well, why did they bury them? Or did they bury them on purpose? Maybe was it Noah's flood that buried them? I don't know. How would you? I'm not a geologist. I did take a geology class in college, but I don't understand how you could necessarily tell if it was an intentional interment or if it was a natural disaster that caused it to be buried.
Well, and I think there's one other that it's probably several, but one other that I can think of, and that is the gradual. The way that age works with things that are created, they move away from their original form and tend to expand outward and become weaker, become less efficient, right? If you look at the way a tree expands, and as it gets larger, it's not getting stronger. It's actually getting more susceptible to storms, to weather patterns.
And then the wind comes and knocks it down.
So what if, as this earth is spinning, that the original creation had a pure, more viable, lush, a fruitful form, and as it aged, different things. So as there were civilizations that were flourishing, and then as the earth, that it could have been a flood, or it could have been that the earth itself expanded over what was there, and that's why you're finding something that's completely covered and almost covered in a way that's like, it looked like it was amazing. Well, it's really hard to go. When you see what these things, how intricate they are, it's like, but why would they make that underground? Well, maybe it wasn't made underground. Maybe it was above ground,
right?
And then over time, it was caused to be hidden. I think one of the more recent finds, and I want to say it's like Grand Canyon with the Smithsonian and that sort of thing, where they're the things that have been found there, not the giant skeletons,
right?
But there have been different things that even had markings of Egyptian.
Right, I've heard of this.
So when you're looking at that kind of thing, you're going, okay, is it really that there was actual digging down and developing, or was it flourishing on the surface and over time became covered by many things?
Yeah. Well, and I think
asteroid. I mean, it could be all kinds of theories. Yeah.
My garden, I made raised beds, and one of the things I noticed as I was out there working the other day is just in the last few years, the beds are about an inch lower in the ground than when I planted them or put them there. And I put down like a couple layers of cardboard because I didn't want to have to, have stuff growing. And I've just noticed that just cutting the grass and just the normal settling of the earth, they've gone into the ground a full inch. And that's just in the short time that I've lived here. Thousands of years have passed, and who knows? But then there's also the idea, but what about all the other structures that haven't sunk into the ground? Like the pyramid,
right. Yeah. But maybe, but there's, along those lines, there's a theory that some of these structures, and they think that maybe the pyramids are actually younger than some of these other things. So it would make sense. Maybe give it another 1,000 years, we just see the tip of the pyramid, like the Easter Island statues, and go, there's other things underneath it. There's whole bodies underneath those Easter Island heads.
Well, we've mentioned this before. We talked about this before. You and I've done a lot of spelunking. And when you go down in caves, they tell you, don't touch stalactites or stalagmites because it takes thousands and thousands of years to form. But I was reading an article about Carlsbad Cavern, and just in the lifetime of my dad, when my dad went to Carlsbad Cavern when he was young, they had these tiny little stalactites and stalagmites that now, in 50 years, are these big columns because they form so fast. So it's like things. I am not convinced that the dating. I was actually watching. There's a show. It's a New Zealand show called Brokenwood Mysteries, and Trevor and I, my wife, were watching it last night. And on the episode, it's the first episode of this season. They were talking about like a paleontologist who had discovered something, and they wanted to get it authenticated. And one of the people was a young Earth creationist on the show, and they were kind of poo-pooing her ideas that the Earth was young as it was. However, and so Trevor says to me, she's like, "Oh, you guys ought to do a show about dating and how inaccurate the dating systems really are sometimes." And it's like,
eHarmony? Yeah.
that is, yeah, eHarmony, yeah, or a farmer, the farmer dating site, Data Farmer, or whatever it is. It's like people put so much stock in. I was watching. I've been watching Joe Rogan's interview with Tucker Carlson, and Tucker makes a statement to Joe Rogan. He was like, "I don't think anybody believes in Darwinian evolution anymore." Right. He was like, "It's so demonstrably proven to be false." And Joe Rogan was like blown away. He was like, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" And Tucker Carlson's like, "Yeah, haven't you looked into this?" Yeah. It's like there's not one transitory fossil anywhere that's ever been found. And Joe Rogan was just sitting there like dumbfounded, like, "I can't believe you're telling me the truth." And then people in the comments are like, "Oh, Tucker Carlson's such a liar. All he ever does is lie." Right. And I'm like, yeah, except the fact that when you look at the fossil books that have been published, there are no transitory fossils in any of them.
No.
Because they don't exist.
Yeah, I saw Richard Dawkins today. I think that's his name. I saw it was an old interview, and he was talking about the intricacy of everything of how life and all that was made, and really points to design. And then he said, but he just feels like Darwin's theory was just a lot more believable for him, and he felt like it was superior. So it's almost like he's saying, no, the biblical theory is what it is, but Darwin's theory, and what, as a psychologist, I'm looking at it going, you can't, for all your objections, give yourself over to the biblical theory. So you're saying it exists, but you prefer that there's a greater one, because it's called being egosyntonic or egodystonic. Egosyntonic means that it agrees with what you believe and all that you stated. Dystonic, which would be, that something would conflict with what you've said all along, and it's hard for you to manage that. So it's obvious that what he's describing is intelligent design, but what he's saying is, I can't admit to it, so I'm going to admit that intelligent design really happened in the Darwinian randomness, and it maintains itself somehow with our Darwinian randomness. This is Richard Dawkins, and so I'm like, right. But, if you're just, if you blink a few times and just listen to what he said, you're like, you don't even buy this.
No, he doesn't. But you know what? I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and somebody was asking him about Richard Dawkins, and he says, "I really like Richard Dawkins." He said, every time we've met, he's just such a great guy, and I really enjoy talking to him. But he was saying, he hasn't talked to him since Jordan Peterson basically became a Christian. And he was like, "I'd really like to talk to him again." He says, because I really get this feeling that Dawkins is one of these guys that he just really wants to know the truth. And I was like, I haven't met Richard Dawkins, but I've listened to the guy a lot, and I think he's a moron that does not care about the truth whatsoever. And I don't know how Peterson gets the concept that, he doesn't want the truth. The truth's been staring him in the face all these years, and he just keeps denying.
And it's really tough. I mean, one of the hardest things for us to do in life is purport something for so long and then be recognized for it, even published for it, even made a living and had infamy because of it, and then say, "Oops, no," because it's almost like you have to give back everything that you've done. Like, you've built this house, and then this house, you're saying, "No, this house is built on either falsehood or lies. You need to take it down." It's hard for us to take that house down.
Yeah, but I believe in truth. And that's all I've ever cared about. And I love Bob Dylan, and for years I purported that Bob Dylan is awesome. But those 3 albums that he made of Frank Sinatra music, they were not good. And I mean, I'm willing to go ahead and say that. I mean, some of them were okay. It was interesting to hear his take on it, but It's not the Dylan that I know and love. And it's like,
well, I don't.
And I love Eric Clapton, but the fact that he's supporting Hamas in the last album bothers me too.
Yeah, I would say that. But if you've made your living debating people on a particular side, that's a little different than the Bob Dylan. Because I mean,
Maybe.
In other words, knowing Willie as a Dylan apologist, and that he is, we thousands of people come to listen to Willie defend Bob Dylan and write books and stuff about it. There you go. That would be, and then for you to go, well,
maybe.
Actually, he's not.
I
who
guess,
I thought he
but
was.
the difference is, I just care about truth.
Yeah.
It's like I only want to know what is true. I don't want to know what somebody's theory is and latch onto it and then be embarrassed if it's wrong. If somebody comes to me and says, this whole thing of Agartha. I mean, I would like to believe that there's a kingdom down there that ran into Admiral Byrd, and I don't know that that's true or not.
Can you tell that story?
It's interesting.
Tell everybody that story.
No, we haven't told about that one. Okay, so Admiral Byrd was a decorated war veteran from World War II. He had won the Congressional Medal of Honor. He flew a mission to the North Pole, and he flew a mission to Antarctica. And apparently he had contact. His son released a so-called diary after he died, like 30 years after he died, that told of his journey into the inner earth. Now, some people have debunked this and said, well, no, that's just not true, because Admiral Byrd came back and he spent time in a psychiatric hospital. So that just disproves it. That doesn't necessarily disprove it in my account. If he came back and people said, well, he's babbling a bunch of nonsense, and they stuck him in a psychiatric hospital, that's not the same as him actually needing to be in the psychiatric hospital.
Yes.
Because anybody could say something that sounds... If you or I told people some of our ghost stories, they would say, yeah, you guys are kind of nuts. But we know what happened to us, And it's like, and both of us are credible, intelligent people who have, we've gone to decent schools and studied, and we're not idiots, but we've had weird things happen to us. And if Admiral Byrd is a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, okay, I'm willing to say he went through a whole lot of stuff when he was in World War II. And maybe that caused him to have some sort of a psychiatric episode. I'm not discounting that that's a possibility, but I'm also willing to say, maybe the man was telling the truth and he encountered something strange, when he was in the North Pole. The thing that I find makes it a little credible is it is a question of why do they black out the North Pole maps when you look at Google Earth? Why is it that satellites aren't allowed to go over the North Pole? Why is it that you have to have permission from all these different governments if you want to go to Antarctica or the North Pole? And nobody can why can't somebody just mount up an expedition and say, hey, I'm going up to visit Santa Claus now and find out what's up there? You can't do that. You have to have all sorts of permission from all sorts of different places to be able to go there, and who do they think they are that they can tell us that we can't do that?
Well, is it one of those things
so
where
obviously
nobody has claimed
something's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I think it is a place that has dominion that's shared by several countries. I think Russia, Finland, Canada. Somehow the U.S. has got their hooks into it, which they're not even connected to it. Well, I guess with Alaska, maybe they are. So it's like you got all these places that have some claim to it, but still, I can go to Finland if I want to, but I can't go up to the North Pole even through Finland. I can't go to Norway and go up to the North Pole. I have to have special permission to do an investigation there. I have to have special permission if I want to go to Antarctica, and there's a lot of places in Antarctica completely sealed off that you're not getting special permission no matter what to go there. And why is that?
Where does the name of Agartha come from? And
Agartha is, I think it's shared between the Tibetan Buddhists and the Hindus and the Chinese. It's like they all kind of have this philosophy over there of an inner realm. And what's interesting about Agartha is you have the king of the world, who is a shining being of great light. And who else do we know that's the king of the world that's a being of light?
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, and he lives there on a throne, and he is the one who dispenses wisdom sometimes to the people above. Well, who was the one that was, equates himself with Prometheus? It's like, if you're not getting it, folks, we're talking about Satan here, Lucifer. Yeah. And he sits on his throne. The Bible says that his throne was in one of the cities, there in Revelation. It talks about that, but we don't know that he doesn't have some inner kingdom somewhere.
Yep.
And I just, it's interesting. And the other thing too is I'm fascinated that a lot of these world cultures, their belief systems, I don't even want to call them myths anymore, because I feel like they're just they're the opposite side of the coin. I think there's a lot of truth probably to a lot of their theories, but they're the dark version of it. Remember the old TV show back in the 80s, Tales from the Dark Side? And when the TV came on, it started off with a picture of like a nice house on a street or something. Then all of a sudden it inverted and it became like creepy music and all. That's what I think is happening. We have these mythologies that are told from Satan's perspective, and they're told from the fallen angel's perspective. And so there is some, there are facts, let's put it that way. I don't want to say there's some truth to it, but there are facts that are part of it that are hidden in this stuff that we can kind of pull at the thread, and we can get to, okay, here might be something that's actually true. Because you can't tell a good lie without having some truth in there as well.
There's got to be something that attracts you, right? It can't be that absurd.
I could, here's an example. I could go around and tell people, I served for 30 years on Mars with a special detachment, and we saw all sorts of crazy stuff. Most people would say, you're nuts. But if I said, I spent 7 years in the Army and I was stationed down at Fort Bliss and I drove a tank around, people might say, oh, really? I can kind of see you as a tank driver. I didn't do that.
Right.
But I could probably convince somebody that I did, because there's enough truth in it. Fort Bliss is a real place. The Army is a real organization. There are such a thing as tanks, and people do drive them. And it's like, you have to have enough truth in the story to make it somewhat believable. So when Satan tells a deceptive story, it needs to have enough truth that people can look at it and say, okay, this is acceptable. I can believe this,
That's interesting. Okay, so metaphorically, so first of all, there has to be points of order, almost like points of light that attract you and say, all right, these are valid, acceptable portions of what you're telling me, and if I took them as structure and took everything else you said, then I could believe your truth, just because I've seen enough evidence in those constellations, those points of light, right? Okay, but what's being done there? It's being buried. We're back to where we started. That whatever it is, that even though there might be something recognizable and something you can hold on to and say, all right, that's enough of a truth that I can hold on. It's still buried beneath falsehood. And, I just wonder, I wonder if life itself has a need to have, or have a theme, let's call it a theme or motif, that things exist, maybe even truth exists. There's two kinds of buried. There's the truth that's buried to be revealed, like Old Testament, New Testament. There's also there's also things lies that are buried within partial truths, which makes it still a lie, even though.
Well, and then, I mean, let's talk about a parable, too. I don't know that the story of Lazarus and the rich man was a parable. Everybody says, oh, this was a parable of Jesus. He was Jesus. That could have been a true story.
Yeah.
And we really don't know. But let's just say it was a parable. A parable is a made-up story. So then what is the difference then between a made-up story, a parable, and a lie? Well, I think the difference is in a parable, you're making up a story that everybody knows isn't true to tell a true thing. Whereas in a lie, you're taking true things and you're twisting it to tell a false thing.
Yeah, one is leading to more knowledge and more truth. The other one is leading
in enlightenment.
The other one is leading to self-serving
darkness.
Destruction. No matter,
Yeah, exactly.
And chaos. One leads to order. One leads to chaos. It's funny. There's an old term, and I'll argue with anybody who wants to argue, but it's called chiasmus, and it means to mark crosswise. And in Scripture, when anything is marked, and even missing the mark is where you're supposed to be in front of you. If you miss the mark, it's also an archery term. Missing the mark, where things are marked, it is the path in front of you that you're supposed to be at any given time in order to make progress, right? But if you mark crosswise, it can be it can be order. In other words, you could be in place, marked and look sideways and say, "Wow, look, there are places going side to side that appears to be advancing, but you're not because you're moving sideways."
Right.
Chiasmus, if you look at it, it's the appearance of chaos in cosmos. Or actually, I should say it's the opposite. It's the appearance of cosmos in chaos, like the way a fractal is. The way it looks like it's order, but it's not. It looks like there's cosmos, but it's really just chaos. So chiasmus has that feature. Wow, I think I see cosmos, but it's in the middle of chaos. So it's still chaos. It's not order.
Yeah, but when you take it further back, if God created everything, then even the chaos has an order to it.
But if you are not, if you are going sideways and where you are supposed to be moving forward, let's say like Jonah, if you've decided you're supposed to be in front, you're going forward to where you're supposed to be, and you go side, he just decided not to go. He said,
"Yeah, I'm not going there. I'm going this way."
What was he supposed to do? He's supposed to develop as a minister, as a teacher, right? He was supposed to go connect with these people. He decided to stay the same and stay exactly where he was.
Yeah.
Well, that's marking crosswise. You are not becoming anything more. You're becoming more and more developed in only being where you were. And look, if you look at Eve in the garden, she was being enticed not to follow where you're supposed to be, but take a lateral move and to become something else away from where she's supposed to be. Now, the enticement was, hey, you could be like a god too, right? You could be like an Elohim. You could be like that too. But that's not where she was supposed to be until she was out of position. But it appeared. But what was he giving her? He was giving her the appearance of cosmos in chaos, which is where the word chiasmus comes from.
Well, and you think about this, isn't that what Satan always does? His whole deceptive thing is never to, do this because it's going to shorten your life and make you miserable and make you an addict and make you a big mess. It's like, no, here, you have the option of having a good time with all these other people and everything, and it's like, but that's just a peripheral thing. There's a lot more to it that you have to unpack.
So let's go back to some of these places within the earth that appear to have not only mystery but order and previous civilizations, that sort of thing. A couple of things, and does the discovery and excavation of these have any contradiction or question marks with a biblical worldview?
Well, I'm thinking like the one off the top of my head is the like I've been to the Stonehenge of America, and nobody knows when it came from, where it came from, who
Right.
made it, why it was made. All of this is, I mean, it's not going against any kind of a biblical thing, but the fact that it's on ley lines, the fact that it's like a direct, you can draw a line from it right to Stonehenge in England. There are things about it that make you think, okay, somebody had to have some sort of exceptional map. Let's just put it that way. They had to have an incredible map to be able to do this, unless, what if there are some sort of structures underneath? Maybe this is where the ley line idea comes from. What if there's some sort of structures underneath the earth that's already been put there years ago by Atlantis or somebody, and somehow people can detect these things, and they just happen to build stuff over it because they sense, oh yeah, this is where I ought to build this thing, and it just happens to be on top of something that's way down in the ground that we don't know about.
Well, does that happen? Is that something that has been a practice or is recognizable from anywhere in Scripture? Yes. The temple was built in the threshing floors of Aruna, whatever that is, where that the angel came and was standing there with his sword drawn, but where his feet were planted on there was where they built the temple, I believe.
Yeah, and I mean, I could be wrong about this, but isn't that really close to the location that will be raised up when Jesus comes back and he stands and it causes a big mountain to form right in that area?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the earth will split, and it's interesting.
I think one of the things that we're taught is, I forget the verse, but it's like, it says that creation itself will reveal truth. We can gather. I forgot the verse. I'll look it up, put it up somewhere. But in doing that, that means that there's a large amount of interaction we have with creation that allows us access to understanding, not only in our lives, but what to do with that creation. So, for instance, if the creation itself had a certain kind of, almost supernatural physics that you could, and certain points you could, larger rocks could be moved, all kinds of things. Then yes, we still have a lot to discover about creation. We still have, there's so much. So I think we
still do anyway.
But I still believe that the closer you were to the creation event, the more knowledgeable and beneficial, or being a beneficiary of the creation, you were. So the farther we are away, I almost see. I mean, look at the Dark Ages. Look how just dumb they were. But anyway, it was just like I feel like they.
Well, but were they?
Well,
I mean, a lot of people diss the Dark Ages pretty bad, but there were the Renaissance came out of the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the Renaissance came out of the Enlightenment. Yeah,
that's true.
It was the Dark Ages that spawned the Renaissance.
I feel like Dark Ages had. It's almost like there was a regression of sorts. But you're right. It could very well have been a different kind of advancement going on. But you and I talked about this before. Last year I got this, the guy who sends me tomato plants sent me this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called the Stone Chambers of Kent. But apparently these stone chambers are all over all over North America. And they're...
If you built one, it'd be the Stone Chambers of Kent.
They would be, and they would fail. They collapse on whatever was in there.
You never know. It might work.
But there's a mystery to them because there's something with it. They're all built the same. They seem to predate even the Native Americans and even the Vikings. There is a...
I am so fascinated about this whole thing.
And they're not made for roots or like a root cellar kind of thing. They're not for dead bodies. They have in measuring electromagnetic information, there's a difference within those those chambers as opposed to outside of the chambers.
That's amazing.
And there was a belief that putting your gardening seeds in there for 48 hours or for a time would give you greater yield than if you didn't. There was something about them that's one of the thoughts about their use. And last year I tested it's really interesting because a guy who gave me the tomato plants to keep track of these went from the chamber and these did not. Can you just grow them side by side, try to treat them the same way? And what's interesting is the ones that were in the chamber weren't particularly more prolific because all the tomatoes did pretty well, but their stem down to their roots, like almost like their trunk, like were almost like it was interesting. They almost looked muscular. It looked like a dinosaur leg.
That's amazing.
They were just like so sturdier than the other ones. It's almost like their root
let me
system.
ask you.
Yeah.
Now, this guy has one of these chambers on his property, or where did you guys find this chamber to?
He heard. Well, it's probably a couple miles from his house.
Oh, okay. So he just went and put his seeds there and waited.
For 48 hours.
How long did they stay? 48 hours. I wonder if something would have happened if he had left them in there longer.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I wonder what would happen, like, if you... Okay, I saw an article or a YouTube video years ago about a guy who he had oxygenated his plants, like he had grown tomato. He basically took a greenhouse and he sealed it off. And then he pumped in oxygen into the greenhouse. And the fruit and vegetables that he grew in there were enormous, like way off the charts bigger than like if you had just grown things, which I think there's a whole lot to be said maybe about the pre-flood world. Maybe there was more oxygen.
That's what I'm saying.
In the environment.
The closer you are to how things were originally created, the more optimum you'd probably see things functional, and your understanding of the earth would probably be greater.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute.
Okay.
Adam was given the task of naming the animals. That was his first job.
Yeah.
He didn't get to his second job because by the time he got done, and who knows how long that took. By the time he gets to the end of the job, he's like, why don't I have a helper? And then God makes Eve, and that's the end of Adam working. Yeah. But maybe Adam would have been called to go forth and then tell us all about plants next. It just makes sense to me that God would have had him do that as well because he was in a garden and he was to tend the ground. Yeah. That was his whole thing. So it's like when we read in the book of Enoch where the demons came down and taught root cutting and all these other different things that we didn't know and they were giving us secret knowledge, if Adam and Eve hadn't fallen, they would have had... They were in communication with the fount of all knowledge as it was. They didn't need... But I think more happened than just the fall. It was not just God kicked them out of Eden. It was like Eden was where the wisdom and the knowledge to learn was. And when they were kicked out, well, now they're kicked into utter darkness pretty much because they don't know how the world works.
Right. That's it. Really.
And then when they get out into the world, it's a hostile environment, that's hard to live in. And I feel like when you look at the consequences of what happened is they had to work hard to till the garden. And so, what's his name? Abel that's what he did. He worked hard to till the garden. Well, Adam had already spent all this years with animals, so maybe animal husbandry wasn't that hard. And Cain, it might have been a simple task to take care of the sheep. Or do I got it backwards?
Yeah, you got it.
I do have it backwards. Yeah, it was Cain that was the farmer, and Abel was the one with the sheep.
Yes, yeah, because Abel's sacrifice was more accepted.
Yeah, and it was a death for the atonement of sin. And I think really that's probably what it came down to is you've got God is saying, look, it's not that I'm not happy that you wanted to give something to Cain, but your offering doesn't represent a death for the atonement of sin.
Well, I think there's also...
And then he got mad about it.
Yeah, then he got mad. Then I feel like there's always the question also, like, did he give his best? Did he give... I mean, because first fruits is a thing. Like, and it looked like Abel gave what was Abel's best, but there's a question whether Cain was doing that, because one would be a definite sacrifice, the other one would be, I have his handy over here, I'll throw that in.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, that's a convicting thing, because we always have to ask ourselves, are we giving our best to the Lord and to the kingdom? And I fail at that a lot, and it's like, maybe we should be asking ourselves that more frequently.
Right.
But let's talk about the green children for a minute. So what are your thoughts on the wool pit?
Well, the tough thing for me is that where they came from has a name of a saint
St. Martin's Land.
Yeah, and it's that would have to have been named after a a person of significance who probably discovered it or went there, or there's a belief system based on him. And what is that saint a saint of or within?
That's what I want to know. I'm trying to look that up real quick. He was called Saint Martin.
But even still,
who was venerated there.
It could have been that somebody explored and found it there and then named it. And, there's...
So we have Martin of Tours, who was the Bishop of France in 316 to 397.
When did this take place?
We have... this was 11 or 1090, something like that. Did you ever watch Cadfile with Derek Jacobi? It was a great show back in the 90s. He was a monk, and he was always solving murders, but he was an herbalist.
Okay.
So he would find, like, this flower can only come from this field over here, so that must be where the murder took place. And it was a great show. Well, it took place during that time period. So we've got St. Martin of Tours was from 316 to 397. St. Martin of Braga, he was the Archbishop of Bacara Augusta in Galatia, which was Portugal.
Oh.
And then there was Pope Martin. Then there was Martin of Ardis, which died in 726, was from Corby Abbey. Martin of Sur was Portuguese. Okay, so my guess is the Martins that make sense would be either Martin of Tours, Martin of Braga, because, that's Galatia in Portugal. That wouldn't be it. Okay, so we got Martin of Tours, Martin of Arades.
These are popes?
No. There was a Pope Martin from 598 to 655. But I'm guessing it's probably one of the British ones. Either the French guy or the British guy.
Because I could see if it's a pope and someone went and explored, then they'd call it St. Martin's Land based on,
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean?
Oh, wait, the Martin of Arades is actually Greek Orthodox. So the only one that would have been near there would have been Martin of Tours.
Okay.
And they called him Martin the Merciful, and he was the French patron saint of the Third Republic, whatever that means. And so I don't know, maybe, everybody wants to text me now about me going to Ireland. So I'm leaving for Ireland on Saturday.
That's exciting.
And we're going to have so much to talk about.
Yes, we are.
It'll be so fun.
I can't wait.
We're going to talk about fairies.
Fairies.
It'll be great. The Tuatha De Danann. No, wait. Tuatha. I forget how my son-in-law told me to pronounce it. But that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to see the Book of Kells.
I saw that.
That ought to be fun.
Yeah.
And it should be pretty cool.
Let's go then the earth again, just real quick. There's another term in scripture that's used a lot. And I think Dr. Heiser would say it's based on the limited knowledge of what they would, how they would describe things, essentially. That it's a matter of just the limited semantic, but the foundations of the earth. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now,
Okay.
we hear that a lot. We hear the foundations of the earth a lot. It's, right? Throughout Scripture.
Yep.
Okay. So when you are... The way the foundations work in general is they have to be buried with enough depth to be able to hold and stabilize and keep not only still but keep strong whatever is above it. And I'm wondering if and even if you're just building a house right now, you have to pour a foundation. And I'm wondering again if the foundations of the earth are things that were built long ago, buried, or it really means that there are some other things, some incredible structures. And the other thing about a foundation. Well, one more thing. There's a foundation does not deteriorate. The foundation is meant to last a long time.
Let's talk about Atlas.
Okay.
Atlas, basically, the Atlas Mountains, he stood up there and was holding the earth, from in space, from falling down and all that kind of stuff, which is odd. I don't understand why myths would work this way. I don't understand how Atlas can be one of the kings of Atlantis,
right?
But yet he also has to... Did he have to go hold the earth up as a punishment after Atlantis was destroyed? Or I don't get it. But anyway, the point was there were pillars there. There's also the pillars of Hercules beyond the Straits of Gibraltar. It seems like there's something anchored in the whole idea of the pyramid and being built on some sort of a complex that it seems like there's underground. There's basically an underground city there, and that they not too far in the past have discovered that the ancients had talked about anyway. I think it was it Herodotus, I think, that had mentioned there being shown a city there, or Strabo or somebody, and basically it's like, okay, well then they find, it's there, and it might stretch all the way to some other city or something. There was something about covering things over back then, and I'm fascinated with the idea in a time period when apparently they didn't have much for lighting other than torches.
Right.
Why would you do this? Why cover things up to where you can't see it, and light can't get in? And
that's I guess that's still my question about whether these excavated, very intricate cities and civilizations were actually buried, or were actually intended to be underground the entire time, or were they flourishing above the ground and then?
I think though that there was something about covering them, because if you look at the story of the Minotaur, he was placed in a labyrinth that purposefully had been covered over. They built the labyrinth, they covered it. They put the Minotaur in there, and that's where he lived. So it's like we do have, if we take that, and I'm sure we could probably dig and find more evidence, but if we take that as kind of a piece of evidence that points towards, in the ancients, they did have the idea of building a city and then burying it, or building a structure and burying it. The question is why?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? And then it makes you wonder, okay, was there really a Minotaur of some sort? What was that?
Yeah.
Was it really like a Nephilim that maybe was in there, or was it like just some deformed person that got stuck down and Theseus went and killed him? Or I mean,
the question is it human truth or just a lot of bull?
Nice. It could be. It's very possible.
I think we should have another. Next thing we talk about has to be Ireland, because
we have to talk about Ireland.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the whole realm of whatever I discover there.
I can't wait.
But I'm also going to Liverpool. So I'm going to go to the Beatles Museum, and then we're going to Edinburgh and in Scotland.
Woo!
So Have you ever been to? Did you go to Scotland at all?
No.
I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what's there, but I think it'll be interesting. I might buy a kilt or something while I'm over there.
How cool would that be?
It'd be pretty cool.
I heard the ventilation's great, I understand.
I have a kilt already. I go to the Highland Festival, and when we have it here in town, and I wear it periodically. But one of my buddies, I found out that my grandmother's family, I thought they were French, but what it was is my grandmother's mother's side of the family was French, but her father was adopted by a French family whose last name was Truitt, but his original name was Young, and he was Scottish, which explains why my grandmother had fiery red hair, and I never knew that until recently. So it's like part of the family, and apparently the Young family is underneath is a sept of the Douglas clan. So, but I don't like their tartan. So it's like I don't want to buy a Douglas clan tartan. But we'll see.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You gotta.
I don't know.
There could be only one. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Right.
All right, man. I gotta wrap it up.
All right, buddy. Hey, you've been listening to the Hidden Citadel. And we are going to be back in a couple weeks. Well, to you, it'll be next week. But for us, it'll be a couple weeks where we talk about Ireland and all the mysteries of the Irish Isles, the Emerald Isle.
It may even take a couple of shows because there's a lot to it.
Oh, man. Giant's Causeway, the Leprechauns.
Cliffs of Moher. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
So much stuff.
Wait till we get to that.
I'm looking forward to it. Eric Clapton is actually going to be in Dublin when I'm in Dublin. Andy's going to be in Liverpool when I'm in Liverpool. So I'm just hoping maybe I bump into him,
Let's go.
and get to talk to him a little bit. That'd be fun.
And where would you meet Clapton? Where's the specific spot? No, there's one spot.
Maybe getting a hamburger or something at a music shop.
Nope. Come on.
No,
it's a location.
The Crossroads.
It's a there you go.
It'll be at the Crossroads somewhere. The funny thing is, I know so many people who know him, and yet I've never met him. And it's like, I know if I ever get to meet him, I'll be like, hey, I know this person and this person and this person, and we would have a good conversation. And then we could talk about guitars and,
and he'd be like,
everything.
Do you know my name?
Yeah, right. I think that would be so cool.
All right, man.
But who knows?
This is awesome.
All right, buddy. We will catch you all later, and I will catch you in the near future. So have a great day. Stay hidden in the Citadel.
In the Citadel. Night is coming.
The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night will soon return. Silly.